and welcome to Josef's Model Railway and Toy Room. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You don't need to like, follow, or subscribe to any of my videos. I just put them out there where I can have a holly jolly great time doing so. Now, after that epic video from last week about the refueling depot, which I'm already working on parts 2 and 3 simultaneously, for goodness sakes, Joseph, please don't say the old, it's just going to be a quick one. We will have a reasonably swift one today. And you did. It never is. Of course, for those of you wanting to see what we're doing, just go ahead to 19 minutes and 30 seconds. For the rest of you, it's just some self-glorified archival footage. I put it there so in future generations we can go back to a video and see what I did. Just lots of research in this one and me just reliving some of those wonderful memories. For those that are interested, you'll stick around. For the rest, just skip ahead. I really don't mind. Oh God, not another blah, blah, blah. That's station name. Why don't I just call it Waffle Station, since I seem to keep waffling on all my life? Because all I want to talk about is getting this section of the scene a little more completed at the moment. Of course, if you just go back to the link that appears somewhere in this window, it will take you back to what we did with creating a bit of a modular landscape and what we did. And the reason I did this was because I still wanted access to the back line here for easy maintenance. Plus, we still need to get a backdrop sorted out. So that's basically what you see here. And I went into a little bit of detail about, as you can see, I created a little bit of a single trail, which I wanted to do with some mountain bike riders up there. One of my greatest pleasures growing up as a young person was the ability to be riding mountain bikes. I just adored mountain bike riding. I still have a mountain bike to this date. And while I don't get to throw a leg over the old iron horse as much as I used to, nothing's changed. The technology has come a long way, but going back to moments of the past, like anything, is always important. And in which case, that's exactly what we're going to do. So, first of all, NOCH make a series of mountain bike riders, and the figures that we're going to be using today from NOCH is number 15899 for those of you playing along at home. And here is a picture of what we have. The reason my fingers are here is because it doesn't look like that anymore. And like all of my great videos, the journey must start somewhere. So I needed to put my thinking cap on about how to add a little bit of Joseph personalization to the scene. And in which case, join me now on a little bit of a blast from the past. For some of my followers who are friends and colleagues who grew up with me, this will all make a lot of sense, and I'm sure you'll enjoy seeing some classic footage. But let's start the journey now, shall we? So for me as a personal journey, it was basically the late 80s, early 90s that saw me progress with mountain bike riding, and I loved every minute of it. But I'm pretty much just going to focus here on sort of the mid 90s through to the early 2000s, which the height of my interests were all about riding a mountain bike, up to and including when I did get my license. I would sooner be out on my bike than driving a car. 95% of all bikes out there at the time were what are known as hardtail bikes. They may have featured some form of front suspension, but the rear was very much just the rigid frame. Still a popular choice in cross-country riding, of course. Of course, dual suspension bikes were still quite the luxury, and I'm one to admit that I didn't have one. And of all the different models that came along, there were some absolute beauties. Of course, up to and including... Well, I'd be crazy if I didn't take you out into the shed, and there is my humble hardtail here, the Diamondback Sorrento SE, originally with Shimano easy fire shifters, to which I did change to the Olivio series. And while it's got a little bit of dust on it at the moment, it hasn't been ridden in a year or two, I absolutely love these shifters, mostly because of the shade of color that's on the rapid fire shifting system. My absolute favorite. Yes, the XT and XTRs are much better, and everything's gone electronic. I do obviously get this service every couple of years to keep her in tip-top shape. Purchased from U-Pedal Cycles in Whyalla. Unfortunately, Jack is not with us anymore, which is a real shame. But of course, what is important here is also just paying attention to the fact we also do have the Shimano DX636 or Big Red downhill pedals featuring Shimano's clipless pedaling system for clicking into your shoes. It's a tremendous ride, and without pulling it out too much, you'll also probably notice, which is currently disconnected, we do have the drill instructor, which was a guide to take out the chain slap that would happen when you're on a downhill run. An absolute fantastic mountain bike of mine. I love every minute of it. I had a custom lighting rig assembled for it and other things. These days with smartphones and all the rest, it's not quite the way we usually do it, but we're paying attention. Well, I never actually made it to owning my own dual suspension bike. I was in the process. So in the very, very, very late 90s, I did finally manage to get a hold of the legendary Diamondback Dual Pro. This was a black frame and featured some red accents. In this situation, it is sitting up there. I picked mine up in fair condition. I did get it powder coated, and we were working on a different shock absorber system, which we never got around to finishing. Would have given me 7.75 inches of travel we could achieve by making a series of modifications and putting in one of the newer shock absorber systems on the back. It was only going to be as a pleasure rider, an absolute plush cruiser, but we never got around to finishing it, and who knows where it may lie. So I've left it up there, and we'll see what happens. And here's some fantastic photos I managed to just dig up. In the background, you'll see this is Whyalla, the town I grew up in, overlooking Tank Hill, as you can see. Telstra Tower there, Telecom Tower, and of course you will see the tank itself, which is no longer a part of the environment. But it was in the middle of town, and some great trails around it. As you made your way around the town, you'd definitely want to go up and over it. My year 12 assessment, part of it was to organise something interactive, so I organised a mountain bike race, and that's actually the chap on a bike there is one of the competitors. I taught him what he knows, and away we go. The other footage we can see here is one of the races that we did attend in the Clare Valley for the Masters Games. Here's me, looking like I have no idea what I'm doing. Not much has changed there. And here's one of my closest friends here who joined me on that trip. In the cross-country race, he actually took out third place. He's still professionally riding as far as I know, last I heard from him. And I look forward to catching up with him, and I'm sure he'll be enjoying this particular piece of footage. Speaking of cross-country, since that's one of the more popular things I like to talk about, I want to take a moment here to talk about Tinker Juarez here. This is a mountain bike rider who specialised in cross-country riding in the majority of the 90s, was certainly here at the Atlanta Olympics doing a fine form for Team America, but also was a proud representative of Team Volvo Cannondale. Now, Cannondale are one of my favourite brands in mountain bikes, full stop, when it comes to mountain bikes. There are lots of great brands, and we'll whiz through a few iconic ones here. My first mountain bike, of course, was an Apollo, the Apollo Cheetah, which was a wonderful introduction to mountain biking, albeit it didn't feature a granny gear, which was the small chain ring we noticed at the front, great for going up the steep mountains. The Kosciuszko, which was another model that did feature it, I didn't have, and I do have a picture of the Kosciuszko here, and the only difference was it's the little bit of pink that was noted at the back of the frame there. It also did feature an XT group set, and most importantly, there's the beloved granny gear below. That, which was an Australian-made bike, also took some direction at the same time from one of the more premium brands, which was Klein Bikes, which unfortunately no longer exist. And for those of you with a keen eye who have seen an episode of Seinfeld and seen that green mountain bike dangling up in the background, that was a Klein mountain bike. Specialized and Trek were other popular brands, as seen with a bicycle dealership in some of the outside scenes, and if you pay attention, in George Costanza's apartment. So back to Tinker there for a moment. Of course, the legendary Cannondale F700 series, which both in the red and the blue are just a magnificent bike. They featured the head shock system, which, unlike the more traditional suspension systems we see at the moment, of course, used a situation in the headset which created a rolling mechanism to absorb the shock. I always thought it was a bit of ahead of its time, and the fatty head, as it was known, was quite iconic. They've of course stayed with the iconic theme and have moved to a system called the Lefty, which, if you notice, their front fork will only have one blade on it, which is very iconic. And while it might seem a little strange, Cannondale of course have done their homework. Of course, at the time, other mountain bike teams that were dominating also included Team Diamondback Racing, which I featured and you'll see in one of my other videos as well.
My mouth's a hurricane, something inside just died. I'd always just assume my evil would subside. Could I been misled? Could you have misread? Please don't punish me for things I have not said. Life's a lonely mile, memory for a while. You never speak to me unless it's to revile. But I will not be denied. Will not be denied. Will not be denied. Will not be denied.
At the point, they were making cross-country bikes and were making downhill bikes as well. Not quite what they are today. And let's just take a moment now to look at what was basically the Lamborghini Countach at the time of mountain bikes, which of course was the Fab Foes Racing frame. And here are some key shots of it. I did actually get a chance to ride one of these, and I can tell you, just a bit like the Lamborghini, as far as I've read anyway, this is a bike that looks better than it rides. It wasn't really quite the most wonderful ride I had, and as I understand from people that have driven the Lamborghinis, they look fantastic, not very practical for driving around. And here's a great example. But going down a mountain at full speed, this was definitely a rig to have. It wasn't quite as lightweight as a lot of the magnesium, carbon fiber, and other composites we're using now to make wonderful lightweight racing frames, but its looks were just legendary. Teamed up with a pair of RockShox DHs at the front, and I think it was a Fox Alps 4 on the back, gave you all the travel you needed, and away you went. Of course, there were better designs, but nothing looked more wonderful. And at the time, I'm pretty sure that frame came in at a few $1,000s. So by the time you had it rigged up, you were at about $10,000, to which most of us $1,000 was the top of our budget. Other notable mentions have to be, of course, Trek introducing their mono-designed Y-frame. Just say yes to the Trek. It was a wonderful design that even had an extra lever which allowed us to lock out the rear shock absorber if you wanted to keep it as a rigid ride on the back. Lots of innovation, lots of developments, and as we can see here in some key pieces of footage I'm using from wonderful fellow South Australian Zoli Borbassi, who has been manufacturing some of the greatest of the mountain bike videos and other BMX and street videos in the series, accompanied by some outstanding Australian talent. It's what got me through most of my teenage years. And let's just take a quick break now and enjoy some wheelie coasting thanks to Mark Grove in Adelaide, South Australia. The footage was shot in the 90s. A tremendous little snippet in the middle of the hyper mountain bike and BMX footage. What's wonderful about this is we start at North Terrace up next to Parliament of South Australia, and he's basically coasting down a slight incline down to the River Torrens. We're going to pass what you see in the background, which of course is the entertainment complex as we make our way down the road. He's coasting nicely down there, and it's wonderful just watching that ride on the back wheel. This kid certainly has some style. Of course, a few things in the scene here in the 90s, as we can see by the cars around us. We also see the standard sort of Adelaide buses, the ones that would be frequenting along the O-Bahn line, which we did make mention of, and is seen in the hyper video if you get the opportunity to get a look at that. If you get a chance to see that video. We'll pass now with the Festival Centre in the background, which actually opened in 1973. In fact, here's a picture of it actually under construction in one of my archival collections. Cruising along now, making a BMX track look far too easy. Tremendous piece of music in the background. And why don't we just cross the bridge of the Torrens here to really finish up the sumptuous little cruise. Well, that's enough of a break now. Let's make way back to our mountain bike riders.
Living on hard times, banners of big crimes, legal propaganda on another line. What's good for the goose never gets further again.
And of course, it would be wrong of me not to mention our fellow Australian Cadel Evans, as featured here. So as we pull them out, what a tremendous little collection we have here. Now, this was my very first mountain bike magazine from my good friend Scott that gave it to me on my birthday. It goes without saying, here is a very young Cadel Evans. It's just an absolutely magnificent magazine. Team Volvo Cannondale. Here is an ad for the Foes Racing frame. 6 inches of rear travel. I mean, come on now. That's an absolute zinger of a bike to have. An ad for RockShox Duty. Really fantastic stuff. Kona Barracuda Trek. A wonderful review on 3 hardtail bikes popular at the time. This particular DBR, which was highly sought after and one of the finest in cross-country coming out of the Diamondback factory at the time. So much so, if I'm not mistaken, that actually had its own ad. Now here it is on the back cover. Interesting enough though, one of the other magazines that brings me straight to my excellent example has to be right here, where here is the Fab Foes Racing frame featuring the legendary RockShox DH forks. This was just before with the evolution that we all started moving to downhill races using the triple clamp fork system, which is quite common, that was taken from the motorbikes. Of course, we slide over here, and here is a Cannondale featuring such system here. And of course, they kept coming. Here was Mike Ronning with his wonderful Fisher bike at $30,000. I mean, it's an outstanding rig at the time. Of course, Finish Line was the preferred chain lubricant we were all using, which is good stuff. So it's nice to know when I'm doing some homework on what we need, I certainly always make sure I have my resources up to and including. Here he is, Cadel Evans, now riding for Volvo Cannondale when he took out the World Cup. And of course, this one is dated 1998. Cadel Evans not only dominated the mountain biking circuit as the ambassador to further cycling, and also was the first Australian to win the Tour de France. So it's wonderful how all these little stories start interlocking together, and I just think it's magnificent. And like Cadel says, you do need the mental to go flat out when you're riding a mountain bike. I do believe that perseverance is the key. Adventures everywhere, up to and including we even had a custom-made trailer made for us that we could lug our fishing gear. And at the time, it might not have seemed like a big deal, but it was. The Bob Yak trailer. Wonderful off-road abilities, although ours was not constructed out of aluminium, it was constructed out of steel. But we lugged that thing complete with eskies full of ice, fishing rods, and all the possible beverages and snacks you could need to spend some nights away from home. It was quite the adventure. Let us just return now to our scene. So we needed some mountain bikes. Now that's exactly what we've got. So without further ado, I'd like to present to you my finished product. So after spending the $27.89 for these, here are the mountain bikes. But if we come in nice and close now, you will see that I have given them the appropriate licks of paint, including the red and yellow representing the Cannondale, that blue and yellow representing the Cannondale, and of course just trying to replicate what leftover colours I had to create a bit of the Fab Foes Racing frame there. So that's what we've got. And so while they are very symbolic to me, which is basically what this entire layout is all about and is why you're joining me for these exciting journeys of mine in personalization and everything, we now need to complete the scene. So pretty much the video is exactly what you think it is. So we're going to grab some of our Micro Mark detail tack. I've talked about this stuff before. It's a special formula that dries clear but remains tacky, a bit like your blue tack you might use for attaching things to a wall, but unlike that, which is going to go hard and nasty and lose its stickiness. This is very good. I like to use this on my figures. So as you'll see, we'll blop a bit down on some baking paper. We'll dip the figure and or the bicycle into it, and then we can put it on the scene. And if we change our minds later and say, actually, I'd rather do a jump here or make it look like this, whatever you need. I'm actually also thinking I might do something where the bike is doing a wheelie through the water, and we might use a little splash of our realistic waves to shape a little bit of a splash zone around it. So that's pretty much what the plan is today. Shouldn't take more than a few minutes to do this, and we should have you out of here in the next couple of minutes.
But we cannot put God in a test tube and say, here is God. Any more than you can put a mother's love in a test tube and say, this is a mother's love.
Now I've just placed the other riders a little further up the way, including one with some hilarious consequences. At the moment, before we start to fiddle around with some water effects, I've just actually locked this one into place and I've just got him propped up at the moment. Once the glue is set, we'll remove that out and add some water effects. I am pointing it out, if it was me on this trail, I probably would be belting down and going for the stiff sailor to head across here to prepare for this run. The theory is this person's going the other way to take the extra speed to get up the steep bit. So he would have coasted down, taken the back wheel down to get maximum traction, splashed through that puddle, and then a fast pedal straight through to get him up. That's kind of the scene I'm creating. For anyone that says just put the damn bike down, it doesn't really tell much of a story, does it? Mind you, you'd want to take it pretty easy. You're going to quickly come unstuck there if you get that turn wrong. Woodland Scenics Water Waves. And if you're playing along at home, the product code, of course, is CW45161. And let me just tell you, it absolutely stinks. So what we're going to do, I've still got our rider at the moment who has basically got his position here, but our glue is still drying a bit. So what I thought we might do is we're going to need to build it up a little bit here. So I thought what we might just do at the moment is we'll just take a bit of this material and just gently start to build a little bit up, and we'll come back. We can make it just a little bit higher as we'll go on. We want to be careful here not to distort the scene too much, because while we want the splash going up, we also want some dry land around it, because it would be splashing to come over. It wouldn't be sort of pre-wettened as a moisture trail has been following and the water's collected and been drying out over some time. So we just basically want to tease this out. Again, I'm almost really just creating that base layer, and we're going to let that dry for 24 hours, and then we can come back. Then we'll have a bit of a base to create a little more to get it sticking out on, and we're going to leave it exactly there. It's tempting to do a bit more, but I think we all know the best thing is to quit while you're ahead, and you can keep building upon it, which is always the Joh model.
Peace, man in the fifth dimension. Peace,
question we ask is, what kind of...
So that's the next layer built up, and you'll see I took a little bit of fishing line, so we'll tease a bit more out after this section dries. Just taking a quick marker to mark out what we're going to be looking at in this scene, which could be a little interesting. Since the woodland scenics ripples weren't really achieving the result I needed, I discovered this green stuff world, and there's a UV resin. Now, for everyone that's watching this, there are plenty of other videos that go into better detail, so please watch them. But at least this will give you a quick sort of overview of what this can do. Now, this is an interesting little product here at the moment. So in this situation, what we can do is we can take a little drop of this, and of course we're going to talk about this in the coastal scene later on. I'm working on something else using some slightly different products, but basically the same thing. We take a little bit out and we can shape it into whatever shape we want. So we'll bring it looking a little more like a puddle, and then let's strike out the splashes that happen when you hit a puddle. The good thing is you can keep working with the material as long as you want. It's not going to dry out on you. It can't dry out until we apply a UV light. Now I'm also going to take a little fold of paper here as well, and I'm just going to put a little bit here to create what would basically be a little bit of a bit of a culvert that may have built up a little bit, where you could run a bicycle wheel through it, where it looks like it's just gone splashing through. So we just tease it out as needed, and we could come along with our UV light. Most people, you can pick up a cheap one on eBay. It looks like a little torch. I'm in the industry, so obviously I have big UV wash lights, so we could just take one of the smaller ones. And we're literally just running it over what we've created. And I apologize, I should be using a darker backdrop, but I think you'll get the idea. The reaction is almost instant. And what we can do once we put it off, and I did just grab a little something black here so we can put it on. Once we get this off, you will see we have created, that's the one with the fold there, this sort of effect, a bit like a PVA, except that we can sort of manipulate the shape we wanted before we let it dry. Let's just take our other one here, and you can sort of see, while it's not a great one, where we can sort of tease out and get those little shards that we're looking for. Now, to add a little more interest to the situation, what we could do is we could snap the shards off, or we can obviously take a good gloop of this stuff in a very basic way you understand here. Flick the UV on, and at least you can sort of see that sort of effect that I'm trying to create there. Just give it a few moments under that UV treatment, and we'll flick it off. And what we've ended up with now is these pieces. Now, what's the big fascination in that? Well, wouldn't it be interesting if we were to take one of these and attach it to this piece here? Sounds fascinating, Joseph. How the heck are we going to achieve that? What sort of material is this? Can we just glue this together? We could. Or we can just get it into place, apply another little drop of the resin, and so we'll just come along once again with our UV. And I will just point out that it is a smart move when you've turned the UV light off, depending on how thick it was, just to give it a couple of moments to cool down. There is a rather instant reaction, and I don't have a thermal imaging device to demonstrate that. But as you can see now, as we take the pin off, here we are. And we've created what I consider to be quite a nice little freestanding effect. So that's what I think we're going to do to create our puddle for the mountain bike. So it's a tremendous product to check out. And as mentioned, I'm working on some other magic as well on the coastal scene using some other products from Green Stuff World. Well, let's get into it.
Are you gonna be free when you leave the world behind? Are you gonna be free when you leave the world behind? Are you gonna be free? I believe the day will come when we will surely die. Leave behind the way you are and walk into the light. Are you gonna
What, is that it? That's all he's gonna shoot? That's all it's gonna be today. What more do I need to do? 3 mountain bike riders into place. I still need to come back, put a little bit of stone, some logs, a bit more detail. But yeah, pretty much that's all we've got in this video today for you, I'm afraid. As you can see, we've had a whole bunch of fun with these shards, creating some stuff with this particular type of resin, up to and including where obviously we can do a bit more detail. This was just a little test piece, so to speak, about adding a little more things with our waterfall effect and the drainage systems and things like that. So I think we're going to come back and do a lot more here. Still got to do a bit more with trees and things like that. But for the moment, that's pretty much all I wanted to do, was just have a home for our 3 mountain bike riders. So Joh Tomac, Tinker Juarez, and of course Cadel Evans, or vice versa, whatever you want to call them. Here they are, having a good time. Girls and boys, ladies and gentlemen, we've finally made the end. So look, I want to say a big thank you, and also Green Stuff World, the UV resin has been wonderful. Really all we did in the video was just glue 3 mountain bike figures into place and added a puddle. I know, it should have been in the Express series. And I'm sorry for those of you that aren't really interested in all the history and everything I went through at the start, but it's significant to me and my family, and that's why it's there. And the great thing about YouTube is you can just fast forward to your heart's content. It's delightful. We're going to be seeing more from Green Stuff World a little later on with a little project we're going back to on the coastal scene beside me. But until then, that's all we've got for today. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'll certainly look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Stay safe. Toodles.